speed dating event here tonight. If this whole crew went to speed dating, do you have any advice for them? Other than how do you handle speed dating?
Speed dating, okay. Again, women are likely to judge you very quickly, and I don't say this to make you be like, just realize a lot of your communication is going to come off passively. Your body language, your facial expressions, how you carry yourself. Even before the first words come out of your mouth, she's going to judge you on an unconscious level. When you are talking to her, please avoid TMI, too much information. I mean, I've heard horror stories from girls that these guys are there on a date with her, and the guy's talking about how at the age of 12 he was still peeing in his bed or stuff like that. Avoid TMI. Just avoid that. Also avoid self-deprecation. Now maybe that's your sense of humor, but when you first make a first impression and you meet somebody, don't make fun of yourself. Don't be like, yeah, I just threw this on because it's the only thing that was sort of clean out of my dirty laundry bag. Maybe it's just a joke, but because it's the first time you met the girl, she's gonna be like, okay, if he's putting himself down, how is he gonna treat a girl? So yeah, I mean, just try to make a strong first impression each and every single time.
So do you think promoting the idea of the white trophy, especially with the pictures on your website, sort of perpetuates the idea that white girls and white people are the ideal, and that everyone else is kind of conservation?
Again, this is kind of similar to what I answered previously before. I intentionally do that because one of the limiting beliefs is that it's difficult or more difficult for us to date outside of our race. But you are correct. I mean, if you want to go very meta, talk about kind of being the self-colonized kind of mentality, of being self-racist and all that kind of stuff. Yes, it's perpetuated on a certain level, but I think it's more at the micro level. I don't think I have that much power over the entire Asian population. Maybe one day, I don't know. But generally speaking, again, this is the idea that first and foremost, there is a large, I think, perception that white women, black women, just non-Asian women do not find Asian men attractive. That's perpetuated by both Hollywood and ourselves. So this is this reaction to that and the way I think to combat it. Because otherwise, the 90% of all the non-Asian girls I've ever dated or hooked up with, 90% of them have told me that they've never thought an Asian guy was interested in them. Because no Asian has ever approached them, ever in their entire life. I remember, there's a friend of ours, she's Miss October 2010. She lived in Alhambra, alright, which is Koreatown, basically, 80% Koreans. She lived there until she was 18. She told me, in the 18 years of her life living in what was essentially Koreatown, not one Asian man ever approached her, talked to her, hit on her. A lot of white guys approached her, a lot of black guys, and a lot of Latin guys, but not one Asian man in her entire life approached her. So again, this is the idea is I am trying to unbrainwash that effect before I will conquer the entire meta strategy of colonialism.
So a lot of the stuff you've been saying is sort of that initial meeting someone, getting the confidence to approach someone. What do you teach your students about after that? Do you deal with what happens after you get the girl's number, or are you sort of more focused on
we do have what to do after. We have what we call a new program called iGame, from text to sex. It's what you do with the number of the text messaging, because they say 40% of women nowadays sex, right? In that regards, we do talk about dating, actual act of dating. Relationships, not so much, simply because it's not necessarily our market at this point. Maybe down the road, as we get bigger and we expand and we can create more classes geared towards classic relationships. But here now, there is a huge demand for simply teaching guys the initial process, because it's harder to practice relationships. I mean, once you're in, you're in.
So I have a half Korean boyfriend. Is that any
Awesome.
different? like because he's half Korean, or does he just, you know, win the social prize?
I mean, I don't think that's what he's winning. I mean,
He just happens to be, you know, outgoing, or is it different because he's only half Korean, or?
I mean, obviously, it depends. Like some guys are, because I have like so many students from different backgrounds. I've had students that are directly from Asia. I have students that are like second, third generation Japanese American. A lot of it depends upon how they're brought up. If they're brought up in a very social isolation environment, then for them, the act of like getting any girlfriend, much less someone outside their race, is a much bigger of a struggle than someone that is acclimatized in a culture. I mean, there is a definite correlation between someone who's acculturated and someone who is not. I will say this, however, one of the interesting things about doing this is what I've learned is Asians, you know, the foggy, fresh off the boat Asians, who come to America after puberty, I find generally both easier and more successful than Asian Americans that are born here. Is because, you know, I remember having a discussion with someone from like Singapore or like Japan, like until they came to America, they had never in their entire life been called a chink, a gook, a slant, an oriental, ever. Like, I remember my first time I was called like a name, like a gook was like when I was 8 years old, walking, you know, home from elementary school. So they, you know, even if they don't necessarily are cultured, they don't have that mentality of being brought down and being treated as a second-class citizenry. So, again, it just goes back to how was your boyfriend raised, and
Well, he did have like a tiger mom type person.
Right.
Went to all Asian middle school, so.
yeah, I mean, you know,
An
it's
anomaly.
no. Again, you know, when I say that this is something that you guys should learn, it's we are talking about just, you know, anywhere 10-20% of the population. I mean, that's just a figure. But there's a definite, like in their seduction community, I would say at least 33, a third of the revenue is generated from Asian Americans.